Have you ever tried to explain a deeply profound, abstract truth to someone, and they just stare blankly back at you? Man, we've all been there. It's literally one of the most universal human struggles. How do you take something totally invisible, like morality, hypocrisy, or the actual condition of the human heart, and make it so vividly real that another person can actually feel it? Well, today in this explainer, we're going to explore how one of the world's most widely read texts solves this exact problem. We're looking at wisdom and imagery, the parables of the Quran, breaking down how ancient verses use vivid analogies to make complex meanings completely unforgettable.
Okay, so let's dive right in. At the absolute center of our explainer today is this Arabic concept of Amsal. Now, it basically translates to a parable or an example. But, it's way more than just a simple comparison. It's actually a literary device where you take something totally abstract and wrap it in a concrete, physical image so that it just sticks in your mind. It's a way of turning the invisible into something we can vividly, undeniably see. So here's a quick roadmap for the explainer. We're going to cover the power of parables, why imagery actually works, explicit versus hidden parables, and then wrap it up with the core lesson.
Let's start with part 1, the power of parables, and how we make truths actually resonate. Listen, it is incredibly hard to make a profound truth hit home using just dry facts. I mean, we've all experienced the utter failure of plain statements. Just look at this contrast. Hypocrisy is dangerous. Okay, sure, it's true, but it's flat, right? It's boring. It doesn't move you. But contrast that with the Quran's approach. It doesn't just say hypocrisy is bad. It says it's like someone who lights a fire to see in the night, only to have the light suddenly stripped away, leaving them completely stranded in the pitch dark. You don't just read that, you literally feel that sudden panic of the dark. It shows you the danger instead of just lecturing you about it.
Moving right along to part 2, why imagery works, and the psychology behind all of this. Scholars who spent their lives analyzing these texts have pinpointed a few core reasons why this works so well. Parables are basically unmatched for teaching complex lessons or issuing warnings and encouragement. Because, think about it, they bypass our logical, argumentative defenses and just hit our emotions directly. By turning these abstract concepts into visible realities, they make really dense ideas instantly easier to grasp. You definitely don't need a philosophy degree to understand the warmth of a fire or the danger of the dark, right?
Which brings us to part 3, clear and explicit parables that use direct comparisons.
So an explicit parable is, well, exactly what it sounds like. It's a direct comparison right there in the text, usually introduced with a specific term that means example or likeness, like the Arabic word mathal. Basically, when you see this, the text is essentially waving a flag saying, hey, pay attention, I'm about to draw a picture for you. So let's look at how these ancient pictures map perfectly onto our modern lives.
We actually just touched on the ancient example of the hypocrite, the guy who lights a fire, feels completely secure, and then is suddenly plunged into darkness. Now, what's the modern equivalent of that sudden, isolating loss of connection? Okay, imagine you're out at night. You're trying to navigate somewhere super important. Your phone is at full brightness, you are completely relying on it, and then, boom, battery dies. Instantly. That sudden sinking feeling of being totally lost and disconnected, that is exactly the emotion the ancient text is trying to evoke about living a two-faced life.
Oh, and here's another fascinating one. The Quran uses this image of rain falling from the sky into different valleys. Some valleys are deep, right? They hold a massive amount of life-giving water. Others are just shallow and barely hold a puddle. Now, the rain here represents truth or knowledge entering human hearts. The key takeaway? The exact same truth can yield completely different results depending on the capacity of the receiver. Honestly, think of it like a modern Wi-Fi signal. It's the exact same network broadcasting the exact same signal, but depending on the device you're holding, you get totally different internet speeds. The source is perfect, the difference is entirely in the receiver.
Building right on that, we have the parable of the soil. Good, fertile land drinks in water and produces rich, useful plants. Bad, salty soil takes in that exact same water and, well, it produces absolutely nothing of value. And just as bad soil produces nothing, a corrupt heart produces bad behavior, no matter how good the advice it receives is. In our modern context, it's like two people getting the exact same brilliant mentorship. One person internalizes it, completely transforms their life, while the other, they just ignore it entirely and stay completely stuck.
Now, this last explicit example, it carries a lot of weight. The text describes a man who spends his entire life cultivating this beautiful, lush garden to support him in his old age. But suddenly, a fiery storm sweeps in and literally burns the entire thing to the ground in a single moment. It's just a tragic loss.
This is a parable for someone who builds up a lifetime of good deeds but wipes them all out through sudden, destructive, or arrogant choices. Today, it's the equivalent of spending decades building a highly successful career or a beautiful family, only to lose absolutely all of it overnight to a string of bad habits or a massive lapse in judgment.
All right, let's move into part 4, the hidden parables, or implicit comparisons. So the crucial thing to understand here is that not all parables announce themselves. Implicit parables are a lot more subtle. They're these underlying concepts and foundational truths woven directly into the verses. They don't use the word example, but they function exactly like one. And over the centuries, these implicit parables often become the everyday proverbs that entire cultures rely on.
Just consider how perfectly these ancient texts translate to the modern mind. The Quran frequently advocates for a middle path, spending that is not too extreme, not too careless. Well, today we just call that work-life balance or financial responsibility. Or take the ancient kind of ominous guarantee that whoever does evil will be repaid. That's an implicit parable of universal justice. In our modern phrasing, we simply say, actions have consequences. The vocabulary changes, sure, but that core human truth, it remains exactly the same.
And to really prove why scholars insist this kind of imagery is necessary, just ask yourself which of these statements hits you harder, okay? First, bad habits are harmful. Or second, bad habits are like termites slowly destroying a house from the inside out. I mean, the first one is just a fact you can easily brush off. But the second, that's an image that makes you want to immediately go inspect your own foundation. And that, right there, is the power of the implicit parable.
Finally, part 5, the core lesson, and really, the ultimate goal of all this. We've seen exactly how these parables work, but what's the endgame here? I actually want to pause for a second and let the weight of this ancient scholar's words really sink in. Al-Mawardi noted this tragic human flaw. He wrote, "People focus on the story but forget the meaning. A parable without its meaning is like a horse without a bridle." Think about that. A horse without a bridle has all the power and beauty in the world, but zero direction. It just can't take you where you need to go.
The trap we all fall into is getting caught up in the poetry. You can't just admire the imagery, you absolutely have to understand what it represents. If you just read these ancient texts for their beautiful metaphors about rain and gardens and light, without actually applying them to your own hypocrisies and your own heart, well, you're making a massive mistake. It's literally like watching a brilliant, thought-provoking movie, but only paying attention to the flashy special effects, while completely missing the plot and the actual moral of the story.
When you truly grasp the meaning, these concepts embed themselves into your everyday life. In fact, so many Quranic phrases are used as everyday sayings right now precisely because their meaning is so universal. Things like, not everything you dislike is bad, which, let's be honest, is basically the ancient version of everything happens for a reason. Or, small groups can defeat large ones, our modern quality over quantity. And truth eventually becomes clear. These aren't just old quotes to throw on a poster. They are literal operating instructions for reality. So let's bring this whole explainer together. What's the big takeaway here? The parables of the Quran are highly sophisticated teaching and psychological tools. They take the abstract, things like faith, danger, truth, and anchor them to real-life, undeniable physical experiences like light, rain, and storms. But the absolute most important takeaway is that the ultimate goal of all this beautiful imagery isn't just to entertain you. No way. It is a structured mechanism meant to provoke deep reflection and, ultimately, real personal change. Which kind of leaves us with one final, essential question to ask ourselves. In your own life, as you consume information, advice, and ancient wisdom, are you just enjoying the captivating visuals of the stories, or are you actually grasping the bridle, understanding the deeper meaning, and letting it guide you? Really think about that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.